Namaste, Dhanavad Pranam. We are here again reading Hegel's Aesthetics. Okay. Do you want me to start, or would you like to start?
Hey, you can start, Prabhu.
Science, on the contrary, the objectors admit, has in its form to do with the thinking which abstracts from a mass of details. Just kind of want to remember what we talked about last time, but in these respects, fine art is unworthy of fun. All right, I'll start from here. In these respects, it may look as if fine art is unworthy of scientific treatment, because it is alleged it remains only a pleasing play, and even if it pursues more serious ends, it still contradicts their nature. But the allegation proceeds in general, it is only a servant both of that play and of these ends, and alike for the element of its being and the means of its effectiveness. It can avail itself of nothing but deception and pure appearance. But secondly, it is still more likely to seem that even if fine art in general is a proper object of philosophical reflection, it is yet no appropriate topic for strictly scientific treatment. For the beauty of art presents itself to sense, feeling, intuition, imagination. It has a different sphere from thought, and the apprehension of its activity and its products demands an organ other than scientific thinking. Further, it is precisely the freedom of production and configurations that we enjoy in the beauty of art. In the production as well as in the perception of works of art, it seems as if we escape from every fetter of rule and regularity. In place of the strictness of conformity to law and the dark inwardness of thought, we seek peace and enlivenment in the forms of art. We exchange the shadow realm of the idea for bright and vigorous reality. Finally, the source of works of art is the free activity of fancy, which in its imaginations is itself more free than nature is. Art has at its command not only the whole wealth of natural formations in their manifold and variegated appearance, but in addition, the creative imagination has power to launch out beyond them inexhaustibly in productions of his own. In face of this immeasurable fullness of fancy and its free products, it looks as if thought must lose courage and bring them completely before itself to criticize them and arrange them under its universal formula. So the two notes here were on Hegel's distinction between regularity, Regelmäßigkeit, and conformity to law, Gesetzmäßigkeit. See Part 1, Chapter 2b. And in this paragraph, we have the first occurrence of Fantasie and Einbildungskraft, translated here and sometimes later as fancy and imagination. And we may be inclined at first to recall Coleridge's distinction between these two English words, although Hegel does distinguish between the two German words when he writes about the artist in Part 1, Chapter 3. C, he usually treats them as synonyms, and I have generally translated both words by imagination. It is a trick of Hegel's style not to repeat the same word in the same sentence or often in a succeeding one, and in order to avoid repetition, he uses two different words as synonyms, even if they are not exactly synonymous. Until this is realized, the translator may perplex himself unnecessarily to find two different English words, in fact synonymous, to render two different words used by Hegel synonymously. Frequent examples of this Hegelianism occur in his use of Inhalt and Gehalt, and the use of Poseidons in one sentence and Neptune in the next is perhaps the reductio ad absurdum of this stylistic purism. Athene, Pallas, and Minerva, within 2 or 3 lines, all mean the same goddess. Yeah, I remember we talked about that at the end last time.
I then remember that last bit that you just read. Almost like, art can be like escapism in that sense. I think we mentioned those things last time as well. That the mind can, go off in different tangents over nature. Nature is nature in that sense.
Yeah, this also somehow, reading it last time, it didn't stand out to me, but this time it stood out to me a lot, because Sripad Puri Maharaj always talks about how there's this second nature that appears in the human life, in the human form of life. It's not just the animal nature, but then we have this second nature where humans can engage in like science, religion, philosophy, art, politics. These kind of things aren't there in animal life. So it's a second nature on top of nature. And here it was just this reminded me of it, because he's saying, art can copy everything in nature, but also it can imagine and express so much more beyond that.
Yes, I like the way he uses it. I think I remember his free activity or fancy. I like that in terms of like exploring your own like mental or imaginations. It says there, fancy, which is its imaginations itself, more free than nature is. That line there is quite interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it really stood out. Sometimes I think maybe you need to also starting to learn his language, how he expresses himself.
Okay. So science, on the contrary, the objectors admit, has in its form to do with the thinking which abstracts from a mass of details. The result is that, on the one hand, imagination with its whim and caprice, the organ, i.e., of artistic activity and enjoyment, remains excluded from science. On the other hand, they say that while art does brighten and verify the unillumined and withered dryness of the concept, on the other hand, they say that while art does brighten and vivify the unillumined and withered dryness of the concept, does reconcile its abstractions and its conflict with reality. It does enrich the concept with reality. A purely intellectual treatment of art removes this means of enrichment, destroys it, and carries the concept back to its simplicity without reality and to its shadowy abstractness. Further, in its content, science is occupied with what is inherently necessary. If aesthetics leaves natural beauty aside, we have in this respect apparently not only not gained anything, but rather have removed ourselves still further from the necessary. For the word nature already gives us the idea of necessity and conformity to law, and so of a state of affairs which, it can be hoped, is nearer to scientific treatment and susceptible of it. But in the sphere of spirit in general, especially in the imagination, which seems in comparison with nature to be peculiarly at home, is caprice and the absence of law, and this is automatically incapable of any scientific explanation. In all these respects, therefore, the argument runs that fine art, alike in its origin, its effect, and its scope, instead of showing itself fitted for scientific endeavor, seems rather in its own right to resist thoughts regulating activity, and not to be suitable for scientific discussion. These scruples and others like them against the truly scientific preoccupation with fine art are derived from common ideas, points of view, and considerations. Their more prolix elaboration you can read ad nauseum in older books, especially French ones, about beauty and the fine arts. And in part, they contain facts that are right enough, and in part too, argumentation is derived from them, which at first sight seems plausible as well. Thus, for example, it is a fact that the shapes that beauty takes on are as multifarious as its occurrence is universal. If you like, you can infer from this a universal bent in human nature for the beautiful, and then go on to the further inference that because the ideas of the beautiful are so infinitely various, and therefore at first sight something particular, there cannot be any universal laws of beauty and taste. Now, before we can turn away from such considerations to our proper subject, our next task must consist in a short introductory discussion of the scruples and doubts that have been raised. 1. As regards to the worthiness of art to be treated scientifically, it is of course the case that art can be used as a fleeting play, according to recreation and entertainment, decorating our surroundings, giving pleasantness to the externals of our life, and making other objects stand out by artistic adornment. Thus regarded, art is indeed not independent, not free, but ancillary. But what we want to consider is art which is free, alike in its end and its means. The fact that art in general can serve other ends and be in that case a mere passing amusement is something which it shares equally with thought. For on the one hand, science may indeed be used as an intellectual servant for finite ends and accidental means, and it then acquires its character, not from itself, but from other objects and circumstances. Yet on the other hand, it also cuts itself free from this servitude in order to raise itself in free independence, to the truth in which it fulfills itself independently and conformably with its own ends alone. Now in this its freedom alone is fine art truly art, and it only fulfills its supreme task when it has placed itself in the same sphere as religion and philosophy, and when it is simply one way of bringing to our minds and expressing the divine, the deepest interests of mankind, and the most comprehensive truths of the spirit. In works of art, the nations have deposited their richest inner intuitions and ideas, and art is often the key, and in many nations the sole key, to understanding their philosophy and religion. Art shares this vocation with religion and philosophy, but in a special way, namely by displaying even the highest reality sensuously, bringing it thereby nearer to the senses, to feeling, and to nature's mode of appearance. What is thus displayed is the depth of a supra-sensuous world, which thought pierces and sets up at first as a beyond, in contrast with immediate consciousness and present feeling. It is the freedom of intellectual reflection which rescues itself from the here and now, called sensuous reality and finitude. But this breach to which the spirit proceeds, it is also able to heal. It generates out of itself works of fine art as the first reconciling middle term between pure thought and what is merely external, sensuous, and transient, between nature and finite reality, and the infinite freedom of conceptual thinking. 2. So far as concerns the unworthiness of the element of art in general, namely its pure appearance and deceptions, this objection would of course have its justification if pure appearance could be claimed as something wrong. But appearance itself is essential to essence. Truth would not be truth if it did not show itself and appear, if it were not truth for someone and for itself, as well as for the spirit in general too. Consequently, not pure appearance in general, but only the special kind of appearance in which art gives reality to what is inherently true, can be the subject of reproof. In this connection, the pure appearance in which art brings its conceptions into existence is to be described as deception. This reproof first acquires its meaning in comparison with the phenomena of the external world, and its immediate materiality, as well as in relation to our own world of feeling, i.e., the inner world of sense. To both these worlds in our life of experience, our own phenomena life, we are accustomed to ascribe the value and name of actuality, reality, and truth, in contrast to art, which lacks such reality and truth. But it is precisely this whole sphere of the empirical inner and outer world which is not the world of genuine actuality. On the contrary, we must call it, in a stricter sense than we call art, a pure appearance and a harsher deception. Only beyond the immediacy of feeling in external objects is genuine actuality to be found. For the truly actual is only that which has being in and for itself, the substance of nature and spirit, which indeed gives itself presence and existence, but in this existence remains in and for itself, and only so is truly actual. It is precisely the dominion of these universal powers, see below part 1, chapter 3b, 2, 3a. It is precisely the dominion of these universal powers which art emphasizes and reveals. In the ordinary external and internal world, essentiality does indeed appear too, but in the form of a chaos of accidents afflicted by the immediacy of the sensuous and by the capriciousness of situations, events, characters, etc. Art liberates the true content of phenomena from the pure appearance and deception of this bad transitory world and gives them a higher actuality, born of the spirit. Thus, far from being mere pure appearance, a higher reality and truer existence is to be ascribed to the phenomena of art in comparison with those of ordinary reality. So I just wanted to say something. Do you have anything to say?
Not really, just listening and digesting what he's saying.
I just wanted to mention this because Sripad Puri Maharaj emphasizes this point a lot about, and I think we talked about it during the first class, about the immediate and the mediated. The immediacy of certainty is what's, sense is just sense perception. And so people are very certain, oh, this apple is real in front of me, but God is not real because I can't see God like I can see this apple. So they're very certain of sense experience, but they have no mediated thought. That's just an immediate sense perception. With mediated thought, when you think about the apple, you realize that there's so many concepts involved with that apple. Like that apple that you're actually holding in your hand is participating in hardness, in sweetness, in redness, and all of those concepts have other objects which participate in them, which are not directly in front of you. So in that way, then you all of a sudden, this thing that's in front of you is connected in a very reasonable way to so many other things which aren't in front of you. And the only way to access that is through deeper thought. The immediate becomes mediated through deeper thought. And that's how we eventually can reach the truth. And so what Hegel was saying here, it struck me as pretty clear that so in the immediacy of our lives, whatever is going on, we may be very unconscious of it and just responding to it in a very immediate way with a lot of certainty. But then art, even when art such as a drama, a play, is about something totally mundane, let's say, still you have to think about that mundane experience in such a way that you can write a script about it. You can write characters that are interesting and doing things that can capture people's attention. And, so you have to think about that experience in a deeper way than the experience it was experienced in the first place. Like if I'm going out to the market to get the apple, just in my daily life, maybe I'm very unconscious and just doing things and accepting that and whatever. But now I have to write a play about that. Now I have to think about like everything that I just did, all the details, and then try to bring it to life. So it's like deeper, it's one step forward into the deeper mediated thought. I think that's what he's saying.
That's what he's saying. Yeah, because I think with art, with things like plays and things like that, you're not just thinking, it's not just the self that's thinking in the sense where you're talking about this deeper sense of thinking. Like, when we're immediately engaging with some sense object, then it's very singular in a sense. But when you're doing something more expressive, then, well, like when you're talking about a play, you're thinking about more of a collective. Not only that, but the viewer, how is the viewer going to perceive it? There's this, well, I think you've got like art for art's sake, where art just becomes its own. There was one part in here which was talking about, if I can find it. Well, it was coming across to me as it was saying like it's just for itself. It's just art can be just created, like when art's created, it's got no other purpose than just to exist, in a sense. So it's just there for itself. Art's there for itself. But it's, then the creator, you've got the creator, the created, and then you've got the viewer, and they're all having some mental or connection with this, with art or creativity. And I'm just wondering if he's where, and I'm just trying to find that in here where it was kind of coming across to me. And about realities, people's realities, and when we're, because we're thinking, feeling, willing, and down to our own experiences. And so depending on that experience is going to be, what they're going to project in that sense. But I understand what you're saying with this other bit that you were talking about. I'm just trying to find where that bit was. It's on the other side. So the bit here is talking about, it's on page 8, the bottom of page 8. It says only beyond the immediacy of feeling in external objects is genuine actuality to be found, for the truly actual is only that which has being in and for itself, the substance of nature and spirit, which indeed gives itself presence and existence, but in this existence remains in and for itself, and only so is truly actual. It is precisely the dominion of these universal powers which art emphasizes and reveals in the ordinary eternal and internal world. Essentiality does indeed appear too, but in the form of the chaos of accidents, afflicted by the immediacy of the sensuous, and by the capriciousness of situations, events, characters, etc. I think that's what it's saying. I don't know, could be wrong. And is it this last phrase, is he talking about when it's saying art liberates the true content of phenomena from the pure appearance of deception of this bad transitory world and gives them a higher actuality born of the spirit, thus far from being a mere pure appearance, a higher reality and true existence is to be ascribed to the phenomena of art in comparison with those of ordinary reality. This is saying like someone with some higher actuality, some higher vision is able to then reflect, like bring that out from what's essentially, this transitory world, but like shedding some light. It's like revealing. It can be revealing. Art can be used to be revealing to a higher understanding, a higher reality. I don't know if, I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand. His language is very hard to really grasp what he's trying to say, because he's like saying lots of things in one sentence. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you just said, that art can shine a light on what's just immediate, and it shows some higher angle of vision from just the immediate. I think that's a pretty substantial realization from like what we read so far.
Yeah.
That it's one step, it's a step higher or further than just seeing a tree and like not thinking about it. Now if you paint it, now you have to think about the tree a little bit more. You have to look at it closer. You have to notice something about it, think about it. So it's one step.
You're right. I think when it's talking about the essence and spirit, I think that in that sense, where you were talking about that example with Priya, or were you saying about the from someone just, I don't know, eating an apple to actually then creating a story, that you're right, they have to think more about something, and they then, like you're talking about someone that's just looking at a tree to someone that has to draw the tree, you have to almost feel it's a bit with Chinese painting, you might not be drawing it representatively, but you're drawing like the spirit of the tree, the characteristics of the tree, what makes a tree a tree. Characteristics of that thing, the spirit of that thing. You're trying to depict that. In fact, even with the Chinese art, that originally it would be more like a meditation. They wouldn't go out and sit in front of a tree or a landscape and draw it. It would be an experience. They'd go and experience, like they'd go for a walk. And then when they come back, the meditation would be, or the reflection would be of their walk in nature, would be, this is why I see sometimes the Chinese landscapes, there's no real horizon line. It's just like trees, mountains, different things, because it's almost like the experience of the whole walk in just one image. So they're trying to sort of, I guess what they're doing is bring the essence of their experience within nature onto one platform. But then you've got this sort of it's like a never-ending landscape, rather than, a traditional sort of horizon with a foreground, a midground, and a background.
Right.
Theirs isn't. It would be, if you look at a lot of old traditional sort of Chinese landscapes, then it would be, it's like you're more exploring. There's no like we're saying, there's no horizon, there's no sort of pathway almost. It's just like can't explain it. But you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I
Like,
think you. I mean, I think you said it like super clearly. You said it's the essence, but they go out there and they do their walk, and then they come back and they have to like distill the essence of their experience and put it on the page. That was
yeah,
that. I
yeah,
think for me that communicated the idea great.
yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's really nice. As an artist, you can feel that kind of stuff. You know, for me, I don't know anything about that.
Well, it's interesting because what it does is it connects you more with your environment. You know, it makes you not so much thinking of yourself in that sense. You think a lot more about the spirit and the nature of the trees, or you know, it's under this sort of idea that you know everything has a personality, even with animals. You know, and that every animal has a personality, like every person has a personality, every plant has a personality, and you start to see its characteristics and its beauty. You start to look deeper within nature. I think it's that inquiry into nature that essentially then I think what he's saying here makes you then inquire deeper, and then brings you to that central spirit, that central conception of, you know, God conception. I think essentially that's where it's leading one to look at, and can be a vehicle to a higher plane of existence and
God,
understand the process. So it's not even necessarily about the art itself, which I think is interesting. It's also about the process. Artistic process is just as important as the art itself.
huh.
What I'm saying here.
I'll continue reading, Didi.
Yeah.
Neither can the representations of art be called a deceptive appearance in comparison with the truer representations of historiography. For the latter has not even immediate existence, but only the spiritual pure appearance thereof, as the element of its portrayals, and its content remains burdened with the entire contingency of ordinary life and its events, complications, and individualities, whereas the work of art brings before us the eternal powers that govern history without this appendage of the immediate sensuous present and its unstable appearance. But
And
if
is
the yeah,
sorry, is he saying there that you know the art that's portraying that um higher appearance is it can't be changed in a sense. It is what it is.
well, you see up here, I thought this was also an important part. He said how, what did you say about the nations? Uh, deepest
We were saying here, like the elements of its portrayals and its content remains burdened with the entire contingency of ordinary life and its events, relations and individualities. For if the work of art brings before us the eternal powers that govern history without its appendage, immediate sensuous present, and its unstable appearance. My dog's dreaming.
here.
Making funny noises.
Well, I can't find it right now, but basically it was saying before how I guess it's the same thing you said about that the kind of the experience capturing the essence of the experience. But
Yeah.
he said before how like the nations, how if you you're
Right.
not able to go and see what actually happened necessarily in the history of a nation, but you can look at its art and you can get a pretty clear picture because they captured the essence of the experience of that nation. So that's
Yeah.
that's pretty significant.
Art's a kind of form of documentation in that
And the
sense.
fact that it can represent so many, it can represent that experience of things
Yeah.
which are non-sensuous. Maybe that's also a part of it. Like it can represent, even though art itself is completely sensuous, it can represent emotion, and emotions are not sensuous.
Mm. Sorry.
Whereas the work of art brings before us the eternal powers that govern history without this appendage of the immediate sensuous present and its unstable appearance. So yeah, so I guess even in like a present, in present experience, like so many things can happen. Of course, in the daily experience, so many things are changing. But those essential priorities that are important. Here he's talking about a nation, so I guess I'll keep with that theme. So those essential priorities, which uh, really characterize or represent what that nation stands for, even though it may be going through a really hard time, and it may not look like that at all at the current moment. Still, that art can represent those ideals and represent, more of a stable uh, concept of what that nation is striving to represent or what they did represent at one time, and they're coming back to that. So it represents something that's more persistent uh, than the changing appearances of the material world. So, but if the mode in which artistic forms appear is called a deception in comparison with philosophical thinking and with religious and moral principles, of course, the form of appearance acquired by a topic in the sphere of thinking is the truest reality. But in comparison with the appearance of immediate existence and of historiography, the pure appearance of art has the advantage that it points through and beyond itself, and itself hints at something spiritual of which it is to give us an idea. Whereas immediate appearance does not present itself as deceptive, but rather as the real and the true, although the true is in fact contaminated and concealed by the immediacy of sense. The hard shell of nature and the ordinary world make it more difficult for the spirit to penetrate through them to the idea than works of art do. But while on the one hand, we give this high position to art, it is on the other hand just as necessary to remember that neither in content nor in form is art the highest and absolute mode of bringing to our minds the truest interests of the spirit. For precisely on account of its form, art is limited to a specific content. Only one sphere and stage of truth is capable of being represented in the element of art. In order to be of genuine content for art, such truth must, in virtue of its own specific character, be able to go forth into the sphere of sense and remain adequate to itself there. This is the case, for example, with the gods of Greece. On the other hand, there is a deeper comprehension of truth which is no longer so akin and friendly to sense as to be capable of appropriate adoption and expression with an expression in this medium. The Christian view of truth is of this kind, and above all, the spirit of our world today, or more particularly of our religion and the development of our reason, appears as beyond this stage at which art is the supreme mode of our knowledge of the absolute. The peculiar nature of artistic production of works of art no longer fill our highest need. We have to go beyond venerating works of art as divine and worshiping them. The impression they make is of a more reflective kind, and what they arouse in us needs a higher touchstone and a different test. Thought and reflection have spread their wings above fine art. Those who delight in lamenting and blaming may regard this phenomenon as a corruption and ascribe to it the predominance of passions and selfish interests, which scare away the seriousness of art, as well as its cheerfulness, or they may accuse the distress of the present time, the complicated state of civil and political life, which does not permit a heart entangled in petty interests to free itself to the higher ends of art. This is because intelligence itself subserves this distress in its interests in sciences which are useful for such ends alone, and it allows itself to be seduced into confining itself to this desert. However, all this may be, it is certainly the case that art no longer affords that satisfaction of spiritual needs which earlier ages and nations sought in it, and found in it alone, a satisfaction that, at least on the part of religion, was most intimately linked with art. The beautiful days of Greek art, like the golden age of the later Middle Ages, are gone. The development of the reflection in our life today has made it a need of ours, in relation both to our will and judgment, to cling to general considerations, and to regulate the particular by them, with the result that universal forms, laws, duties, rights, maxims prevail as determining reasons and are the chief regulator. But for artistic interest and production, we demand in general rather a quality of life in which the universal is not present in the form of law and maxim, which gives the impression of being one with the senses and feelings, just as the universal and the rational is contained in the imagination by being brought into unity with a concrete sensuous appearance. Consequently, the conditions of our present time are not favorable to art. It is not, as might be supposed, merely that the practicing artist himself is infected by the loud voice of reflection all around him, and by the opinions and judgments on art that have become customary everywhere, so that he is misled into introducing more thoughts into his work. The point is that our whole spiritual culture is of such a kind that he himself stands within the world of reflection and its relations, and could not by any act of will and decision abstract himself from it. Nor could he by special education or removal from the relations of life contrive and organize a special solitude to replace what he has lost. In all these respects, art, considered in its highest vocation, is and remains for us a thing of the past. Thereby it has lost for us genuine truth and life, and has rather been transferred into our ideas instead of maintaining its earlier necessity in reality and occupying its higher place. What is now aroused in us by works of art is not just immediate enjoyment, but our judgment also. Since we subject to our intellectual consideration the content of art and the work of art's means of presentation, and the appropriateness or inappropriate of both to one another. The philosophy of art is therefore a greater need in our day than it was in days when art by itself as art yielded full satisfaction. Art invites us to intellectual consideration. and that not for the purpose of creating art again, but for knowing philosophically what art is. But as soon as we propose to accept this invitation, we are met by the suspicion, already touched upon in pages 3 to 5, that while art may well be a suitable subject for philosophical reflection in a general way, it may not be suitable for strictly systematic and scientific treatment. But this implies at once the false idea that a philosophical discussion can also be unscientific. On this point, I can only say in brief that whatever ideas others may have about philosophy and philosophizing, my view is that philosophizing is throughout inseparable from scientific procedure. Philosophy has to consider an object in its necessity, not merely according to subjective necessity or external ordering, classification, etc. It has to unfold and prove the object according to the necessity of its own inner nature. It is only this unfolding which constitutes the scientific element in the treatment of a subject. But insofar as the objective necessity of an object lies essentially in its logical and metaphysical nature, the treatment of art in isolation may, and indeed must, be exempt from absolute scientific rigor. Art has so many preconditions, both in respect of its content and in respect of its material and its medium. And the note here is colors, sounds, etc. are elements in which art is at home, or its medium. Okay. So, whereby it always simultaneously touches on the accidental, and so it is only in relation to the essential inner progress of its content and means of expression that we may refer to its necessary formation. Okay. Devi, if it's okay with you, I'll continue down to 4 and then stop right before that. Okay. 3. But what of the objection that works of fine art are not susceptible of a scientific and intellectual treatment because they have their origin in the heart, an unregulated imagination, and incalculable in number and variety, exercise their effect only on feeling and imagination. This is a perplexity which even now still seems to carry some weight. For the beauty of art does in fact appear in a form which is expressly opposed to thought, and which thought is compelled to destroy in order to pursue its own characteristic activity. This idea hangs together with the view that the real in general, the life of nature and spirit, is marred and killed by comprehension, that instead of being brought nearer to us by conceptual thinking, it is all the more removed from us, with the result that by using thinking as a means of grasping what the live phenomenon is, man defeats his own purpose. At this point, we cannot deal with this matter exhaustively. We can only indicate the point of view from which this difficulty or impossibility or unadaptability can be removed. This much at least will be granted at once, that the spirit is capable of considering itself and of possessing a consciousness, a thinking consciousness of itself and of everything originating in itself. Thinking is precisely what constitutes the inmost essential nature of spirit. In this thinking consciousness of itself and its products, however much freedom and caprice these may always have, the spirit is acting in accordance with its essential nature, provided that it be genuinely in them. Now art and works of art, by springing form and being created by the spirit, are themselves of a spiritual kind, even if their presentation assumes an appearance of sensuousness and pervades the sensuous with the spirit. In this respect, art already lies nearer to the spirit and its thinking, then purely external, spiritless nature does. In the products of art, the spirit has to do solely with its own. And even if works of art are not thought or the concept, but a development of the concept out of itself, a shift of the concept from its own ground to that of sense, still the power of thinking spirit lies in being able not only to grasp itself in its proper form as thinking, but to know itself again, just as much when it has surrendered its proper form to feeling and sense, to comprehend itself in its opposite, because it changes into thoughts what has been estranged and so reverts to itself. And in this preoccupation with its opposite, the thinking spirit is not false to itself at all, as if it were forgetting and abandoning itself thereby, nor is it so powerless as to be unable to grasp what is different from itself. On the contrary, it comprehends both itself and its opposite. For the concept is the universal, which maintains itself in its particularizations, overreaches itself and its opposite, and so it is also the power and activity of canceling, again, the estrangement in which it gets involved. Thus, the work of art, too, in which thought expresses itself, belongs to the sphere of conceptual thinking, and the spirit, by subjecting it to philosophic treatment, is thereby merely satisfying the need of the spirit's inmost nature. For since thinking is the essence and concept of spirit, the spirit in the last resort is only satisfied when it has permeated all products of its activity with thought too, and so only then has made them genuinely its own. But art, far removed, as we shall see more definitely later, see page 71 below and also page 9 above, but art, far removed, as we shall see more definitely later, from being the highest form of spirit, acquires its real ratification only in philosophy. Nor does art elude philosophical treatment by lawless caprice, since, as has been already hinted, page 9 above, its true task is to bring the highest interests of spirit to our minds. From this it follows at once that so far as content is concerned, fine art cannot range in wild, unfettered fancy. Kant, Prolegomena, 35, the understanding is our only support in setting bounds to the fantasies of the imagination. From this, it follows that at once, as far as content is concerned, fine art cannot range in wild, unfettered fancy, since these spiritual interests set firm stopping places to it for its content, no matter how multifarious and inexhaustible its forms and configurations. The same holds good for the forms themselves. They, too, are not left to pure chance. Not every artistic configuration is capable of expressing and displaying those interests, of absorbing and reproducing them. On the contrary, by definite content, the form appropriate to it is also made definite. And so, after all, seen from this angle, we are able to orientate ourselves by process of thought in what seemed the impossibly vast mass of works and forms of art. Thus, we have now stated, in relation to our science, the content to which we propose to restrict ourselves And we have seen that neither is fine art unworthy of philosophical treatment, nor is philosophical treatment incapable of descrying the essence of fine art.
Mhm.
A couple of things came up that I wanted to talk about, if it's okay. Did anything come up for you?
Oops, sorry. What you say?
Well, here at the end, he says, so this whole paragraph really, where he's saying that in order for art to actually inspire and lead the mind to higher to the purposes of spirit, it can't just be a free-for-all.
Yeah.
That there has to be some structure. And what that reminded me of is how Sripad Puri Maharaj always says that, you know, in order for there to be freedom in a nation, there has to be laws that everyone follows. Otherwise, if it was just a lawless place, everybody would just do what was necessary for their highest interest, for their self-interest. And because we're all finite beings, when we center ourselves on ourselves, what I want is different from what someone else wants for themselves. So we're going to fight. And it's all this, very chaotic environment, actually. So when there's no law, there's no freedom. It's chaos. And then people become oppressed by that chaos. But when there are proper laws and there's a proper form to follow that is thoughtful and considerate in a way where we're trying to actually create create freedom for everyone. And of course we're talking in a like very limited way, in a mundane state, but still you need the law for that freedom. So same thing with the art, because I don't think Hegel would like abstract art. Like I've seen so many people make abstract art, and I'm sorry to say that, but I don't want to offend anybody. But
art forms are like this now. That it's all free for all. When you're talking about free for all, and it's basically that, you're given a space and you do what you want. There's no teaching, there's no technical structure, there's nothing. You just do what you want, which seems like very self-absorbing in one self. Is that the word? It's very self-absorbed in a very
it promotes that
unhealthy way, really. I think it's like you're saying, with the rules or regulations, like we have our own in Krishna consciousness, we have our rules and regulations, because for us to be able to, so it's like a channel, it's like a path to take us to a higher platform, a higher experience, a higher understanding. If you don't have that concept of spirit, they don't like what we're saying here. The spirit in the last resort of it's only satisfied when it has permeated all products of its activity with thought to, and only when it has made generally its own. Then it says but art far removed, as we shall see more definitely later, from the being the highest form of spirit, acquires its real ratification only in philosophy. I mean, what I was also taken from this is that, like art, like many things in this material world, they act as like a what's the word? Like a facilitator to get you to a higher platform. That, and ideally, I think that's what he's saying. You know, like if one doesn't have those boundaries, if one doesn't have that channel, if one doesn't have, like in our we might perceive that as association or guru. If one doesn't have that, then it is like a free for all. It just becomes absorbing. Well, it says here, not every artistic configuration is capable of expressing and displaying those interests or absorbing and reproducing them. On the contrary, by definite content, the form appropriate is to it is almost made definite. That bit. But it's interesting how he's talking about science and the science of art and how it's not worthy of science.
Said it is.
He said it is.
Yeah, here he was just posing a, like up until this point in the section was him posing a point that he thought many others would think, that art, you can't make a science of art, but his whole agenda here is he has a science of art.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So,
I was just looking for the part where he was saying how that the essence of spirit, I don't want to say it wrong, that's what I'm looking for what he said. But basically how he said that the primary activity of spirit is pure thought, and so that's how art is trying to act as the first stepping stone from the sensuous nature, the immediacy of sensuous nature. Art is the first stepping stone of trying to direct the development of higher thought, trying to get people to think about what they're perceiving sensuously, what they're trying. Art's the first medium where it's trying to direct people into deeper thought about spirit. But anyway, yeah, that was the only thing.
yeah. Yeah. Thus, the work of art, too, in which thought expresses itself, belongs to the sphere of conceptual thinking, and the spirit, by subjecting it to philosophic treatment, is thereby merely satisfying the need for the spirit's innermost nature.
Yeah, where was that?
That's on page 13. It's nice that.
13.
Page 13, it's just a bit in the middle.
Yeah.
And 4, since thinking is the essence of the concept of spirit, the spirit in the last resort is only satisfied when it has permeated all products of its activity with thought too, and so only then has made them genuinely its own. For art far removed, as we shall say. Is that it? No. What's going
Yeah, and in Veda, you know, like we hear Balaram is all of the devotional paraphernalia and the environment, right? You hear that, and so that's actually called Sandini, the Sandini potency is Balaram, but Krishna is the Samvit potency. So Sandini potency means willing, the environment, but Krishna is the Samvit potency, means thinking. Krishna is that. In Veda, it's very clearly there. Krishna is the thinking potency of himself, Samvit. And then, but of course, the deeper feeling is Hladini. That's Srimati Radharani.
Yeah, many layers and levels. Yeah.
Sure.
Understanding the thought and thinking. It's nice. It does make you think deeply. And you know, I mean, even like you're saying just now, like with the Vedas and Shastra, what we read, there's many layers to even one shloka, even, you know,
Sure.
different understandings, and it's so incredible when you think about that.
Sorry, Krishna is Navayovanam, ever fresh.
Yeah.
Even infinitely expanding in infinite directions from infinite perspectives. So it's like, what?
Yeah, it's incredible when you just think about that. It's just mind blowing, totally mind blowing.
Yeah, but it's all ecstasy for his pleasure.
Yeah.
So our ability to try to study these things only has context in that service. If it was like, if we were trying to endeavor this way for just some kind of like understanding so we can enjoy our own artistic, you know, do it for whatever other reasons, we wouldn't, you know, be able to do anything, because we don't we're not really seeing the context of what is that end of spirit, what is Krishna's purpose. And not that we're seeing what his purpose is, but we're trying to serve that. We're seeing ourselves as a part of that, and we're trying to participate in that as finite spirit, trying to participate in the infinite spirit, which is the organic whole.
Yes, and essentially it's, you know, taking one from one concept to the other concept, because even within art and all these things, is that still very self-indulgent kind of sensory on both sides, on the artist and the viewer also, you know.
Yeah, but that's just material culture. I mean, anything. That's why it's almost like you can't even pay attention to it, because of course, anytime we consider material culture, we're only going to see bad things, because that's what it is. And the whole material culture, whether it's in art, science, whatever, family life, anything, it's all based on everyone is centered on themselves, and they're enjoying everything else, including each other. They're enjoying each other for themselves. And so by doing that, by participating in those mundane activities, you know, it's just what's the word? Enabling. You know, enabling is like, by participating in that, we're letting everyone else know that, you know, it's okay, what you're doing is fine, I'm okay with it, and I'm going to also participate in it with you. But so same thing with this art, you know, making all that kind of more mundane art, no problem. Everything that's going on, people make art just to satisfy themselves or to look real pretty and get a lot of money. So participating in that is just enabling others to participate in it without feeling any kind of doubt or questioning about it. But by trying to participate in a way which is truly dovetailed with Krishna's will through the conceptions that our Guru Varga has taught, and trying to present those things in the mood of preaching. And preaching means not trying to convince people, trying to change their mind, like Srila Prabhupada said like this, but preaching just means we're just trying to share what we have learned by the mercy of Gurudev, the sweetness that we have learned and the sweetness of that conception. We're just trying to humbly offer it in a public space, and people come take what they want. And if they don't want to take the whole thing, okay, we can't change it. We can't force anything. So, but we're just trying to offer it in an open, humble way. Also, we're repeating it for ourselves. So we're also practicing kirtanam, so we're just trying to do like that. And we can't control anything. We can't control, but we can just try to do our service, focus on that service, and by Krishna's grace, the results, whatever he wants them to be, they'll come like that. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Srimati Kanu Priya Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Jai.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too.
See you Saturday. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.